Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. We're coming to you from the Pacific Toyota Dealer Studios. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. My name is David Quadrelli. I am joined by Harman Dial, and some big news today as Kiefer Sherwood has been traded from the Vancouver Canucks to the San Jose Sharks. The Canucks, in return, getting a 2026 second round pick and a 2027 second round pick, along with depth defenseman, going to play in the AHL, Cole Clayton, right shot defenseman. We'll talk about all of that. Harm, your initial reaction to the trade. I think it's worth highlighting the second round pick the Canucks got in 2026 is San Jose's, because they also had Colorado. So that's a big difference. Colorado's pick versus San Jose's, big difference. Canucks get 2 second round picks, both belonging to the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, I like this trade. I think it's a completely satisfactory return. I did trade grades in the initial aftermath of the deal over at The Athletic, and I gave the Canucks a solid B for this move. I mean, for them to get an A, we would have loved to, of course, see them get a first round pick. But as we discussed on one of our shows last week, the rental forwards that fetched a first round pick last year, Brad Marchand, Brock Nelson, and Mikael Granlund, were in a completely different tier of forward and as a player than Kiefer Sherwood is, where Kiefer Sherwood, we know because he, since coming to Vancouver, so not just this year, but because he's been a 24 goal scorer, really cheap cap hit, hits like a truck, just has so much dog in his game, is a really valuable asset. Ultimately, as a pure rental, though, I don't think his straightforward value was commensurate with a first round pick. It was in that interesting middle ground where he's definitely worth more than the second round pick, but I don't know if it's quite in that first round territory. So I understand why the Canucks couldn't get a first round pick. And I also look at the fact that there were a lack of contenders with first round picks available to them this year. Dallas, Edmonton, Colorado, Tampa Bay, Minnesota, Vegas, and Florida had all already traded away their 2026 first round picks. Those are the true Stanley Cup contenders that would have felt confident that, hey, we're going to go deep in the playoffs. Our first round pick is going to be a late first round pick. And so we'd feel more comfortable maybe giving up that first. Whereas a team like San Jose, they're on the cusp. They're on the fringes of a playoff spot, and it could go either way, where that first round pick is probably going to be somewhere in the teens, maybe the late teens, maybe the early teens. And so it'd be a little bit reckless to trade that kind of a pick for a rental middle six forward, even though I think we expect the Sharks to explore an extension with Sherwood. So overall, I like the move.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning when we talked about other teams, a first round pick from a contender pretty damn close to a second round pick from the San Jose Sharks. Like I was explaining this today, is that pick could start with a 3, like it could be the 39th overall pick. That's, the Sharks are trying to make the playoffs. They're in a playoff spot right now. So it could be that, or it could be in the 40s. But it's probably going to be a top 50 pick in the draft when you look. Like the odds of the Sharks jumping to being a top 10 team in the league, like I don't think that's going to happen. So you're looking at drafting a player in the top 50. And I think the Canucks are really excited about doing that. Whereas if you go get a first from Colorado, and I know, again, we just listed all the teams that don't have a first round pick, but my point being, from one of these contending teams, if you wanted a first round pick and you're picking 29th, well, okay, yeah, you're 10 picks sooner, but now you've got 2 second round picks. I thought the Canucks did fine in that return. And I know low bar and people will scoff at it, but I also give them some credit for not grabbing a B-level prospect in this, or like a 24-year-old. I know they grabbed the defenseman. That doesn't count. That's not value added. That is literally just they need warm bodies in Abbotsford. But I mean, like Filip Hronek, we talked about him, right? And what did you say last week? He might just be Aatu Räty. He's probably just going to be an Aatu Räty level prospect. And ultimately, the Canucks are going for the higher ceiling here. And I really like that. I really like that they decided to get a second round pick rather than kind of going in the bargain bin of San Jose prospects and bringing one over. I like that this was very future oriented.
Yeah, and not even the secondary piece, but sometimes with this organization, we've seen them, for instance, when they traded Jannik Hansen, they did it for Nikolai Goldobin, right? Who, yeah, was a former, I want to say late first round pick at the time, was at least 2 or 3 years into his development. And you thought, all right, he's a decent prospect. Ultimately, you would have probably preferred just taking the draft pick. And same thing with the Burrows, Jonathan Dahlen trade, where ultimately it ended up panning out fine because the Canucks traded Dahlen for Linus Karlsson, who's now an effective contributor. But they didn't make a trade where they targeted a 22-year-old former first round pick who hasn't been figuring it out, or maybe he's on the fringe where he's a point per game guy in the AHL, hasn't quite been able to stick in the NHL, and you think the ceiling's a little bit lower. And this is why functionally when teams get too caught up in this idea of, well, no, we don't want draft picks, we want prospects who are either further along in their development, or we want like an early 20s NHL ready player. The issue with that is the teams that are going to be willing to give up those types of players, chances are that young player or that 21-year-old prospect probably hasn't been trending in the right direction, because if that prospect or young player was on the cusp of making a big league impact, then the organization wouldn't want to give that piece up for a rental. So I like that the Canucks prioritize the draft picks over young players or more advanced prospects, but because I think you'd be sacrificing something with the ultimate ceiling.
Walk in the chat said trades are so fun. It doesn't matter how good or bad the team is. I'll always enjoy trades. I like that comment. If you want to make sure your comment or your question gets on the show, then hit us with a super chat. Proceeds from our super chat go to the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. Brad Anderson in the chat said, my wife, who doesn't care about the Canucks, appreciated Harm's use of the word commensurate. Just saying. I like that. That's good. Kiefer Sherwood, we had a rare chance that a guy is on the ice at morning skate when he finds out, or he wasn't on the ice because he's injured, but a rare opportunity to speak to a guy as soon as he was traded. But Kiefer Sherwood made himself available. He didn't have to, but he chose to speak with media this morning. The full video is up on the Canucks Army YouTube channel if you want to go find it. I think he spoke for about 8 minutes. A lot of good stuff, but there's a 2-minute snippet of it where he talks about his time in Vancouver, how thankful he is for his time in Vancouver. Again, this is a guy that was a late bloomer and forged his way into an NHL career in Vancouver. Like, he needed the opportunity. He wasn't getting it sufficiently in Nashville. He got it in Vancouver. Again, scored 19 goals last year. He's already at 17 this year, and the dude is up for a big payday. We're obviously big Kiefer Sherwood fans on this show, but I wanted to play this clip of Kiefer Sherwood speaking with Vancouver media earlier today.
Obviously, a little caught off guard. It just was bag skating. So then I got off and was told, obviously. So just, first and foremost, I'm really thankful for everything that the city and this organization has given me. And I know they say you earned it, but you got to have the opportunity. And, as a guy that has been a late bloomer, it's everything I could have hoped for and more. And this is really a special place to play. And I think that's the hard part at times about the business is you get attached to certain, cities and communities. And I feel like this city and place to play in this organization, they do things the right way. They really live and breathe hockey. And I think that's why that passion has been it's been a mutual respect and appreciation. And I've said that, I wish obviously nothing but the best for this organization moving forward. And I know, no matter what people feel, like the organization is going to benefit from this with the picks and whatnot. So I'm just really grateful for everything, and couldn't have asked for more coming into this. And when I just told Patrick and Jim that I wanted nothing more signing here than to make the playoffs. And I know the city, how much it means to them and craves it. And the playoffs are a special time for every city and team, but it's different here. And hopefully it's sooner rather than later. And sometimes you just got to trust the process as a player. And I think it's there. The other part of it too is there's so many great connections in the locker room, and I think that's the hard part. Is I have so many brothers for life and so many great guys that I'm gonna miss. So I would never ever close any doors in life, but I'm just grateful for everything, and I wish nothing but the best for the people in the city of Vancouver.
Kind of sad. Like it's kind of sad to hear Kiefer Sherwood talk. Walk in the chat said it sucks that this was the only move that made sense because Sherwood loved Vancouver and is exactly what I want future Canucks to be like. Yeah, it's bittersweet. It honestly is bittersweet. Kiefer was an absolute pleasure to cover. Again, someone in the chat also said, so we're just getting rid of anybody who's willing to speak to the media. Sherwood was always great. I always loved my conversations with Kiefer. It is bittersweet. It absolutely is bittersweet that he had to go. But as Walk said there, had to go. It was the only move that made sense. Like we talked so much about how extending Kiefer Sherwood would just be a mistake for where this organization's at. It's unfortunate that they were in that position, but also not light at the end of the tunnel. But the other perspective on this is like they found Dakota Joshua, they found themselves Kiefer Sherwood. You hope you can go find the next Kiefer Sherwood in free agency. And again, you're still going to sign veteran players and you're going to be signing guys that are low cost, like Kiefer Sherwood was. Again, 2 years at $1.5 million annually. You hope to find a guy like Kiefer Sherwood in free agency.
Yeah, or not even in free agency, but perhaps opportunities to take on players that aren't working out in certain scenarios. And I think about, for example, the Blackhawks caught a lot of flack at the time for acquiring Andre Burakovsky, who the Kraken wanted to offload. And they acquired Burakovsky thinking, all right, this could be our Bedard running mate. And when you're a rebuilding team, you're naturally just going to have more lineup opportunities to put guys in different positions, to get more power play opportunity, to play consistent top six ice time. And you look at a player like Burakovsky, he's up to 30 points in 43 games, where I don't imagine that the Blackhawks are going to be in any rush to move him because I believe he has an extra year left on his contract. But you took a player in Seattle who there wasn't a lot of demand for Burakovsky to now they're going to be able to, if they ever wanted to sell, flip him for something meaningful. Same thing with Ilya Mikheyev, right? Ilya Mikheyev was a cap dump for the Canucks. The Canucks paid a second round pick to get off of the deal. Mikheyev has quietly become a really useful top 9 piece for him. And now whenever they decide that they want to potentially sell him, they could retain salary and they'll be able to get a decent pick for Mikheyev too. So not just in free agency, but on the trade market in the offseason, you're going to have opportunities to take on like just these change of scenery trades where maybe you're able to acquire a pick, maybe you're not, because with the rising cap, I think we saw Pittsburgh was the only team this past offseason that was able to net where teams paid Pittsburgh significant sweeteners to take on some of these contracts. But point being, there's still going to be opportunities to resuscitate the value of out of favor players and then give them top 6 minutes, give them power play one time, and then trade them for something more meaningful down the road.
Patrick Alvin spoke today as well. One thing he was asked about, Harm, was what's next? Like, well, what's coming next? Do you think there's going to be more trades? And he did say, like, flat out, he said, I expect more trades before the deadline. So the Canucks are open for business. Again, we've talked about the trading key for Sherwood is not to say bare minimum, but we talked about how that's not really like a rebuilding move. That's more of a, we're missing the playoffs. Obviously, you're trading your UFAs that you're not planning on extending. But what's next? And it sounds like the Canucks are going to stay busy. We saw some rumors, some reporting over the weekend about Connor Garland potentially going. He was on After Hours with Scott Oak, and not to change the subject too much, we're obviously going to talk about the game a bit as well, but he talked about how he hasn't even thought about leaving Vancouver, and that if he ever got to the point where he's thinking about leaving, it would be a long decision, a long discussion that he has with his wife. And also worth mentioning, of course, Garland doesn't have trade protection right now, but at least that was, he sounded very interested in sticking around at least for the end of this season. So I thought that was at least worth mentioning, but going to be interesting to see where the Canucks go from here. If you had to give a guess, where do you think the Canucks go from here? Like, I think they do trade one of these guys with term before the deadline. I know Elias Pettersson's name's been out there a ton. Filip Hronek, over the weekend, his agent, Alan Walsh, came out and just said, stop having discussions about players with no move clauses. Phil doesn't want to go anywhere. That was in response to a transcription of a 32 Thoughts podcast with Elliot Friedman, where he talked about how there would be a ton of interest in Filip Hronek. And basically Alan Walsh said, don't waste your breath. He ain't going anywhere. But lots of different names out there. Obviously, we heard Jake DeBrusk as well. I have trouble trying to figure out like what the next move is going to be, like in terms of who it's going to be. But I think with all these, it seems like there's so many lines in the sea, or whatever the term is, whatever the metaphor is. It seems like there's going to be something else before the deadline, aside from just like another UFA, like Evander Kane getting traded. It feels like one of these guys with term is going to get traded.
Yeah, there should be. Again, like you said, it's tough to peg who specifically it will be. But if I look, I have it jotted down somewhere. The Canucks have 8 veterans on their roster who are 27 or older, make at least $4.5 million against the cap, and are signed for at least 3 seasons after this one. So that includes Besser, Garland, Elias Pettersson, DeBrusk, Hronek, Demko, Marcus Pettersson, and Kevin Lankinen. Now, of course, Canucks are handcuffed to some degree because a lot of those players have partial, if not full, trade protection, and are going to have a lot of control in this process. But that's not going to stop other teams from calling. And just because a player has trade protection doesn't mean that, like, we've seen plenty of examples around the league. In Vancouver, a player has a no move clause, but if a team's clearly going in a new direction, they're rebuilding. A lot of times both sides can come to some kind of agreement and send the player to a destination that they're happy to go to. I think the interesting thing that I'm going to be keeping an eye on as well, or not that we're really going to have an eye on it or an indication, because it's not going to be visible to the public, but just seeing the Canucks losing streak continue this long, and to see them dominate again on Hockey Night in Canada, 6-0 blowout loss. What I know for sure is that in the immediate aftermath of the Quinn trade, there wasn't a single vet that approached management and said, hey, get me out of here. I want out. But you also have to keep in mind that the trade happened and then they rattled off a 4-game winning streak. And as a player in that locker room, you could maybe, you're not thinking, oh, we're going to be a playoff team, but you could think, oh, this is kind of fun and exciting. Maybe we could be a young, plucky, hardworking team. Maybe be what the Calgary Flames were, where those vets, Mackenzie Weegar, Nazem Kadri, Jonathan Huberdeau, when you're competitive, even if you don't make the playoffs, it's still fun to mentor those guys, to be in games night in, night out. It's not a miserable environment. The last 10 or 11 games, it's starting to become a miserable environment. And if this continues for the next 10 games or so ahead of the deadline, are any of these vets with term going to have a little bit of a change of heart, where maybe it's not even going to management specifically and saying, hey, if you can find a trade for me, I'd like to go out. But a situation where if management gets an offer that they really like, they at least approach the player or his agent and say, would you be open? Maybe there is more of an open-mindedness on some of these veterans parts, because it's been really rough for this team. And I think the reality of what this Canucks rebuild is going to look like post Quinn Hughes is setting in, of this isn't going to be a quick turnaround. It's going to be ugly at times. There's going to be a lot of pain, and you better be ready to embrace that, to maintain a good attitude through all of it, if you want to be part of what this organization is trying to build over the long haul.
You're absolutely right. Do you have anything else you want to say about Kiefer Sherwood? I want to close the book on this. I want to quickly talk about that Edmonton game, and then you've got some numbers for us. And of course, we have to talk about our baseball session over the weekend as well. We'll get to that and anyone else. But just as we close the book on Kiefer Sherwood, Harm, I'll ask you this question that I'm about to answer as well. How will you look back and how will you remember Kiefer Sherwood's time? And I know we're talking about a guy that made $1.5 million, was signed as a fourth liner. I'll tell you mine. Mine is, I'm never going to realize that he was never part of that 2024 playoff run. In fact, he was on Nashville. Like, they played against him. I'm never going to just remember that. In my mind, Kiefer Sherwood is big-time hockey. He's playoff hockey. I've heard his name chanted, and I associate a lot of that with that winning season where they won the Pacific Division. in my mind, Kiefer Sherwood was a part of that. He never played a playoff game in Vancouver. I know I'm saying this like it's a surprise to people, but it always takes me a second to like clock and be like, oh wait, he was never actually a part of that success.
Me too, because he embodied everything that
yes
that would have fit in so well, and would have made him a cult hero in that playoff run.
Yes,
just such a heart and soul player, got that dog in him, and not just, oh, here's a gritty guy that likes to throw the body, but has some genuine skill. I mean, the shot that he had, that was one of the biggest surprises for me when Kiefer Sherwood first came to Vancouver, is he's got a violent release to his shot. It pops off his stick. It's honestly, in terms of pure velocity, maybe harder than Besser or Pettersson's shot when you see it live and in person. I don't know if the numbers necessarily back that up, but you combine that with some of the hands he has as well, and some of the moves we saw on breakaways, and he was just such an electrifying player. It's a shame, as you alluded to, that we never got to see him playing in the playoffs in this market. But ultimately, I'm really glad to see an underdog who was absolutely through the ringer. Took him forever to become a full-time NHL player, and then to finally get a top-line opportunity. He's now put himself in a position where he could earn $25 million on his next contract and set his family up for life, instead of being in a position where 2-3 years ago, you don't even know
two-way contracts
up and down. And like for us, when players get sent down or they're thrown on waivers and another team picks them up, we just see these as transactions, right? We see the notification on Twitter, or we see the transaction log on Puckpedia or Sportsnet or wherever, but these are real human beings. And these journeyman players, it's brutal to have to relocate your family, or sometimes your family can't relocate in the middle of the season. And so now all of a sudden you're off to a completely different city and on a different side of the continent, and you're away, or you're separated from your family, and you're kind of all alone. For him to break through that wall and now put himself in a position where he's going to be able to stay in one spot for a really long time, earn life-changing money. It's just an awesome underdog story.
I'm so happy for Kiefer Sherwood. I can't stress that enough. I'm so happy for Kiefer Sherwood that he's going to get his bag. So happy for him. Also, he's expecting in April. He thanked management. And I think that was part of the clip, but just in case it wasn't, he did thank management for getting this done a little bit sooner and not, upending him and his wife's life right like a month before she was actually due. So nice for them to get settled in San Jose. Looking forward to watching him. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the dude's going to play with Macklin Celebrini, right? Like, have you looked at Sharks line combos? He's for sure playing with Macklin Celebrini. I would be stunned if for the rest of the year, his most common line mate isn't Macklin Celebrini. Now,
they have options, though. I imagine Sherwood will get a look at some point, but we saw Chernyshov in that spot earlier, and those two had a lot of chemistry. I think Chernyshov's been bumped down more lately.
Colin Graf always is there right now.
Yeah, and Graf is such a dog too. He's also like a speedy, pesky. He's not as physical as Sherwood, but just so hardworking, so fast, wins a ton of puck battles, penalty killer, kind of fits a similar role as a complimentary sort of puck retriever kind of a guy. So yeah, I imagine Sherwood will get a look with Celebrini at some point, and man, that would be exciting to see. But it also wouldn't surprise me if he ends up bouncing up and down that top nine and getting opportunities with a bunch of different guys to see who he meshes best with.
Now, I will say this, because the San Jose perspective of this, we've only talked about the Canucks perspective. Do you think I don't want to say it's an overpay. It did surprise me a little bit that San Jose pushed their chips in on specifically Sherwood. I think it'll make more sense if they get him signed to an extension, which they should be able to. They have cap space, all that sort of stuff. But did it surprise you at all that they paid up, that they were the team that paid up for Kiefer Sherwood? It's not at the level of like, oh, the Rangers are interested in Kiefer Sherwood. But for the Sharks to push their chips in on Kiefer Sherwood, it did surprise me a little bit.
Yeah, it surprised me a little bit too. I think ultimately you don't make that trade if you're Mike Grier unless you're very confident that you're going to re-sign Kiefer Sherwood, right? Of course, if he ends up walking in the summer as a free agent, it would be a massive disaster. But if they have $53 million in projected cap space for next season, they're going to be able to pay him whatever he wants. And the San Jose perspective is interesting because if you're a Sharks fan in favor of the move, it's easy to look at it as, hey, here's this fast, hard-hitting, heart and soul veteran who, even if he regresses from his goal pace this year, should still be a reliable bet to get you 20 goals. He's going to be physical, such a pain in the ass to play against without taking undisciplined penalties. And that's another underrated part of Sherwood's game is he did all that game within the game stuff. He was a genuine rat, but didn't take the undisciplined penalties that sometimes that type of player ends up taking. And so you look at him as, we're going to be able to re-sign him. He's going to be a veteran to help this young up-and-coming core. And ultimately, he didn't surrender a first-round pick or a premium prospect. But then the risk here, which I think is legit, and I honestly see both sides as having a reasonable case. The risk is you're in a position to contend for a playoff spot right now, but part of the reason for that is because the West is so weak, and the growth of young rebuilding teams isn't always linear. So this is relatively early to be buying and adding a veteran to your program. And more specifically, what does Sherwood's next contract look like? If it's a 5x5, is it 5.5 times 5? And I do think there's some risk involved with Sherwood's next contract, where, he's in the middle of a career season and his agent knows he has a lot of leverage, especially now that the Sharks gave up a lot to acquire him. Does that next contract, especially for a player that's going to turn 31 in less than 2 months and plays this all-out max energy style, is it going to age well in year 3 or year 4 when the Sharks are going to more formidably be in the mix as one of the better teams in the league? But then the counter to that would be, well, they have so much cap space that even if in year 3 or 4 he is overpaid by, let's say, $1 million or $1.5 million, that's maybe something that you can live with if that's the only veteran that you're slightly overpaying, especially because of all the other intangibles that he brings to the table.
Last thing for me on all of this, Harm, is just the excitement around how many draft picks the Canucks have. We need to have Dave Hall on the show. Like, someone do a wellness check on Dave Hall, because that dude is probably ecstatic right now. Also important to mention, the Canucks, just the 2027 pick that they got is now their only 2027 second round pick, because they traded it away in the Ilya Mikheyev trade to the Chicago Blackhawks, their own pick, that is. So now they have a pick in the second round. That's important. But focusing on 2026, it's 2 first round picks, their own, and the Minnesota Wild pick. And it's 2 second round picks, their own, and the San Jose Sharks pick. And again, when we just look at pick value over on Puckpedia, that's quite the valuable pick that they've got with the Sharks pick. That is, right? That's going to be a mid-second round pick, whereas obviously the Wild pick is going to be mid to late, but the Sharks pick is going to be a mid-round pick, which is great news for the Canucks. And honestly, for all these people that are saying these names, like we threw out Ryan Lynn, Patrick Allvin was at the Giants game over the weekend. I'm not saying they like Ryan Lynn, but I'm just pointing this out. This is currency. And it goes back to the point I made about not going out and getting a B-level prospect. This is currency. You could see a world where the Canucks package that Minnesota pick and maybe the second round pick, and say the Minnesota pick is 27th overall, and they really like a guy at 16th or 15th. They could bump themselves up in the draft, take someone that they really like at 15 and give away a second or a first or whatever. You get what I'm saying? Is like, They have some currency now. They have some currency that's going to help them on draft day to get creative. And how much do we bring up the Montreal Canadiens? They've done a really good job of this over the years of just packaging picks and then moving because they really like a guy and they have some conviction in what they do. And you hope that the Canucks are going to be operating the same way. You hope that the Canucks aren't pulling we're going to trade for Marcus Pettersson again because we really like these draft picks. And obviously that's not what they're going to do, we hope. But my point being that by getting these picks, they've got a ton of options. We're going to be breaking down a ton of names of who they could draft, and we have to be ready for anything, because realistically, it's not just where you line up. It's that they have not so much, but they have more currency than they've had in years when it comes to draft picks, that they could get creative here to go pick wherever they want, really.
Yeah, and the key is going to be actually holding on to the picks. Now, again, I don't think they're going to do a Marcus Pettersson type trade where you're trading for an older veteran.
Even like Kent Johnson or like a young player, right?
Yeah, and I don't think this market would have a lot of appetite for age gap trades where you're trading one of those second round picks for, 22 or 23-year-old that you're thinking with a change of scenery can bounce back and turn it around in Vancouver. So that's part one. Is in the past we've gotten excited about, hey, they've got all these picks, and then they end up trading them in pretty short order.
Yes.
They have to prove that they're going to be actually patient and draft players with those selections. Number one. Number two, of course, it's going to be a massive shot in the arm if they keep all those picks, and especially since their own selection is going to be likely top three. You're going to get an elite prospect. It's going to be a massive shot in the arm of this team's prospect pipeline. However, it is also just the start, and you need to keep, you can't look at all the draft capital you have this year and go, heavy lifting's done. We no longer have an urgent need to cash in veterans for draft picks. And now moving forward, we can keep hunting for age gap trades because we've got plenty of picks. We don't need more picks. I look at, for example, the Chicago Blackhawks, and I don't think you need to accumulate pick volume to this extreme of a degree, because I think the Blackhawks did a complete tear it down to the studs rebuild where they even moved guys that I thought they should hang on to when they were really trying to tank for Bedard. But you look at their situation, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They've made 11 first-round picks in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in. 11 first-round picks in the last 4 years. I'm not even including all their second-round picks, which, the last couple of years, they actually didn't have seconds, but they had, 1 year in 2023 where they had 3 second-round picks. They've had years where they've had multiple thirds. So the point being, not just Chicago, but you look at how many picks Utah has had. The Nashville Predators, because of some of the different trades that they've made, have accumulated a lot of pick volume. The Sharks have had a decent amount of pick volume. The point being, you've got to keep adding and stay disciplined about continuing to exchange some of your veterans for value. And it's going to be interesting as well for the Canucks, especially with some of these guys that have term left, where you're going to have to make a determination of, a massive part of why the Canucks were able to get such a significant return for Sherwood is because they put him in a position to succeed, and he genuinely thrived here. That's, as an organization that's rebuilding, creating value is going to be important to create pieces that other teams want and will pay a lot to acquire. And when I look at some of the vets that the Canucks have right now, part of the issue in terms of getting lucrative hauls for them outside of the no trade production that some of these guys have is a lot of them are underperforming, right? Even if the Canucks wanted to, for hypothetical purposes, and I don't think he'd want to leave anyway, so maybe it'd be a moot point, but even if they wanted to move, let's say a Brock Besser, how many teams are going to want to touch that contract given the year that he's having? Jake DeBrusk, I actually think his contract's pretty reasonable, but how differently would teams look at him if he was on pace for 30 plus goals rather than having 1 5-on-5 goal all season long, right? If Marcus Pettersson was playing some of the best hockey of his career, and we've heard teams are lining up for Filip Hronek, how many teams would be nearly as aggressive and nearly as excited about, hey, can we get our hands on Marcus Pettersson? And this is where organizationally you're going to have to figure out, do we have the right systems and coaching in place to maximize our veterans, and just also acing the timing of these moves of, okay, what are these vets trade value right now. Is there a realistic scenario where we can prop them up even further? And that then puts us in a position where maybe you don't want to execute some of those trades at this year's deadline, but further down the road, that's part of the strategy. It's going to be important for the Canucks to really ensure, like we talk a lot about developing young players, and that's really important to rebuild. You also got to make sure that your vets are performing as well as possible, because that's going to go a long way in making sure that you're able to then exchange them for significant value further down the road.
It's like I talked about last week, rehabilitating some value for a guy like Brock Besser was one I used as an example. So before the trade today, we were going to have a big conversation about Adam Foote. And I think we have to have a small conversation about Adam Foote because you transitioned it pretty well. Before that, though, I want to tell everybody about one of our sponsors, and it is Greta, a great spot for all games, home and away. You can skip the line and not have to pay cover if you're wearing the home team's gear. And of course, there's also the game day specials at Greta, including $3.33 off select food items, $3.33 on select drinks, and more. They've got the arcade, they've got the bar, they've got the street food menu. Check it out. 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. All right, I wanted to talk about this. All right, Adam Foote, Canucks lost 6-0. You're always going to talk about the coach after 6-0 loss. You're always going to talk about the coach after a 10-game losing streak. Let's all be adults about this. I'm a preface by saying that. Let's all be adults about this, okay? I thought Daniel Wagner did a really good job over the weekend. He wrote a column over at Canucks Army in his Wagner's weekly column that he does over at CA, and he basically talked about what options the Canucks have. Now, this isn't me coming out and saying, like, you got to fire Adam Foote right now, and I'm not even going to say, oh, you got to fire Adam Foote. It's just, what do the Canucks have in front of them? Where are they? Like, they're approaching a road with 3 forks in the road, all right? They have different paths they can go down. They can decide, actually, this man-on-man system that Adam Foote's doing is what we want our players to be able to figure out long-term. We think he's going to be the coach that gets us through the rebuild. We're going to keep him around. We think he's a good coach. We're going to keep him as the coach not only this season, but throughout next season as well. They have the other option of, well, we don't want a new coach bump, right? We don't want to skyrocket up the standings. We need this high pick, so we're going to let the losing continue. And then as soon as we get our first win, we'll fire Adam Foote or whatever, right? Like we're gonna build up more of a cushion. They've got a 7-point cushion on the Winnipeg Jets right now. If they let that continue, then they can revisit it later down the line. Or they could decide right now, like, we need to just get Adam Foote out of here and this needs to change right now because, and then they could have different reasons. I think the biggest reason, and I think the reason it's being talked about other than the 10 losses, is that A, your veterans don't look very good, which you just talked about. There's some importance in that. But B, like, it's been a rough go for the young defensemen as well. And if this team's excited about their defense prospects, I think they need to put an emphasis on developing those guys. And I'm not sure how much developing is going on right now. And I think that's probably where I land in the conversation, is just like we talked about what a rebuilding coach's role, or excuse me, what a coach's role during a rebuild is. And largely it's to develop those young players. And I'm just not sure how much development is going on right now. Again, it's not all on Adam Foote. We've been saying that all year. It's not all on Adam Foote, but I think it's a bit of a problem that Foote doesn't seem like the best communicator. At least publicly in the media. And I get that that's not the end all be all at all. But I think when you couple the fact that there's a lot of losing going on, that I'm not sure any young player has gotten better this season. Like DP's taking a step back. Verlander, we didn't have a ton of sample size on or anything like that, but like Bouillon looks worse than he did in Minnesota, right? Like there's that aspect.
He's looked lost at times, but it's important to remember Bouillon's defensive metrics were some of the worst in the league, which again is fine because he's a 20-year-old rookie defenseman. Even when he was in Minnesota, he was still having some of these low points defensively. There were a lot of these similar, like, loud mistakes in Minnesota. I don't think he's gotten worse in Vancouver. It's just that, and I think
a worse situation, obviously.
Of course, but you are right that it's not as if he's taken a massive leap. And there's still time for that. And maybe that's what the Canucks are weighing. My point isn't like, oh, I think they should get rid of Adam Foote. That's not what I'm saying. Mark Rivera said Ogren. Ogren's look good. Ogren's look pretty damn good since coming to Vancouver. But more importantly,
it's important to mention what we've been talking about all year, and it's that all of the defense has seemingly taken a step back. The Canucks have defended worse. They look lost in this man-on-man defensive zone system that nobody seems to really be getting, except for Filip Hronek. He's looked great. But I think that's just worth mentioning, and I think it's all kind of part of the equation of what you're weighing is there development going on? Okay, answer that question. Is there winning going on? We know the answer to that. No, there's not winning going on. Are players getting better? Have those conversations is basically all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I don't think they need to rush to make a decision right now, but I will say I am becoming increasingly worried about Adam Foote not being the ideal head coach for this team beyond the season. Like I already had red flags and question marks. Those are only growing by the day. And again, it's, as you said, it's not just about the losing, right? We're not having these conversations because they're losing and, because there's been the occasional blowout loss lately. It's all of these, it's the lack of development of the young players. It's the way that a lot of the veterans have taken a step back, but it's also a lot of micro decisions that don't make sense.
Yep, exactly.
Right? Like, why is Niels Höglander healthy scratch for a second game in a row in favor of Arshdeep Bains? Right? With Arshdeep Bains, what's the upside there? And Höglander, again, we talk about a rebuilding team. You want to take the pieces you currently have and then showcase them, market them, or even if they aren't part of your long-term future, put your organization in a position where you can eventually peddle them to somewhere else and recoup significant value. What is sitting in the press box going to do for Niels Höglander's value? And again, this is a player that, remember, he got off to a rough first half of the season last year. And then in the second half, January onward, right around this time of the year, he was one of their better wingers down the stretch, one of their top 5 and 5-point producers. His two-way analytics were stellar. You should be giving Höglander, especially because he missed so much time early in the season because of injury, an opportunity to get his game going again. And again, especially because what is Arshdeep Bains going to provide to this lineup? I just don't see the upside. The way Aatu Räty has been managed this year. And I know Räty hasn't been the most noticeable the last 10 to 15 games, but especially with Bluger coming back now, we saw him we saw Räty at yesterday's practice, not one of their top 4 centers, and that doesn't even take into consideration the fact that Hedo's going to be potentially back soon, and Rossi's out of lineup as well. But even earlier in the season, when Lucas Reichel got how many games, like a really extended look to be the team's second line center, and Aatu Räty was still playing 11, 12 minutes a night, and he's another example of a young player that I was hoping could have really developed, and I don't think the coaching staff has given him the adequate opportunity this year. It's just, and then even other things like Elias Pettersson's ice time at times, where really early on in the season, his 5-on-5 ice time was a lot lower than Filipino's, and then in some recent games, not all, there have been nights where David Kampf has played more than Elias Pettersson. It just, a lot of these micro decisions add up, and especially when you look at Foote's lack of track record as a successful head coach at prior levels, I don't know if he, I'm not going to completely write him off. There's still a lot of hockey left to be played. Maybe we see a lot of development from the young guys down the stretch, and we're singing a different tune. But when I look at the total body of work, even when I consider how rough a hand he's been dealt, I don't see a lot of positives in terms of Foote's job as the Canucks head coach right now. And again, none of that has anything to do with them being 32nd place. It's everything around that.
Let's continue this conversation with some help from the chat in Anyone Else, which is brought to you by our friends over at Pacific Toyota Dealers and the Toyota Prius plug-in hybrid, a no-compromise approach to electric vehicles that offers the best of both worlds. You can drive 72 kilometers on battery alone, enough to get you from downtown to the rink, the grocery store, and home to recharge. Then seamlessly transition from electric mode to the gas engine for a combined range of 962 kilometers. There's no sacrifices when it comes to horsepower style with its sleek, low and wide exterior and sophisticated interior. It's loaded with tech that's actually easy to use. You can plug in to recharge at home or at one of the over 2,000 public charging stations in BC alone. And now you can lease a 2026 Prius plug-in hybrid SE from $109 weekly at 3.99% APR for 64 months with $3,300 down. Visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer today. All right. The chat. What do they have to say about this? Preach harm. We got one of those. We got people pointing out the big thing that matters is if players have tuned out foot. Like, we talk about culture, we talk about development. What you really don't want is like Adam Foote comes in, gives advice to Zeev Buium, and then Tyler Myers puts his arms around Buium and says, hey, don't worry. And I'm just throwing out names. I'm picking names to be clear. And a veteran, not Myers, whatever. A veteran comes over and says, don't worry, don't listen to him. It doesn't matter. He's not going to be here long. Nobody listens to him, whatever. You don't want that. You don't want that festering. You don't want that kind of culture. And that's what ultimately, like, we don't know. We're just saying like, that's what you don't want to have, and management has to have the pulse on that. Another comment here. Where did it go? I apologize. It was about Marty St. Louis. There's so many comments. Appreciate everybody commenting, but it kind of makes it hard to... Yeah, here we go. Tillo in the chat said, you can tank with a good coach, because there was people in the chat saying, don't fire Foote because you can't ruin the tank. Tillo said, you can tank with a good coach, just like the Habs under Marty St. Louis. Again, I bring up Dom Ducharme. I bring up Marty St. Louis because Dom Ducharme was the coach right before St. Louis took over, and they decided that St. Louis is going to be the coach of the future. And I know everybody thinks that guy for Vancouver is, well, not everybody, but a lot of people think that guy for Vancouver is naturally going to be Manny Malhotra. If the team feels like it, if they feel like Manny Malhotra is the guy to lead them through this next wave. And again, Marty was coaching Pee Wee before he came up, right? Like, he had no coaching experience. At least Manny's got AHL coaching experience and coached them to a Calder Cup win. If Manny's that guy, then yeah, I like the idea of bringing him in. Now, my point from earlier is if you think Manny's going to give this team a bounce, which I'm also not sure about, like, this team isn't going to have Thatcher Demko for a good chunk of time, right? It looks like, and we'll get to that in a second, and anyone else. But I don't know if the Canucks, again, we're talking about a 7-point cushion between them and the Winnipeg Jets. I know there's still a lot of hockey to be played, but if this losing continues, because they're not firing Foote today, like, they're going to at least play one more game with Adam Foote as the head coach. So, and again, and when I say this, it makes it sound like I'm saying like, oh, we're just waiting until Adam Foote's fired. And I'm trying my best not to just say that. But if the Canucks feel like Manny is the future coach and it's not Adam Foote, then I could understand why they would want to make a change mid-season, because you start to implement those habits. You start to play those young guys. You start to have them in the environment that St. Louis had the young Habs players in that environment. And then they were all taking that step together. I missed a super chat, but thankfully we basically answered it because it was from Condones, regular listener to the show, who said he went on a big rant to Quads in Twitter's DMs about the coaching staff. Yeah, we did have a good conversation about that. Appreciate the super chat. $5 super chat. I did not turn off my notifications from the spam. That was a good chat. But in all seriousness, like, this conversation about Manny and about the future of the team, you just kind of have to look at it from a distance and say, what's going to happen next year? Like, what's this team look like next year? Because I don't think there's that big of a risk of a dead cat bounce. I don't.
Well, also you can time it so that if you wanted to go down the road of a coaching change before the end of the season, so you give your young players at least some runway of, all right, fresh start, new voice, confidence in the new direction, at least a stretch of hockey where you feel like you're making progress. You could make that change with 4 to 6 weeks left in the season, where the cushion is likely greater than 7 points, and there's so little runway left in the season. And frankly, there's so little talent left on this roster that even if you're better in those final 4 to 6 weeks, you're largely losing games 3-2 instead of 6-0. And even if you are picking extra wins here and there, or extra just points by forcing games to overtime or whatnot, that your deficit in the standings is so significant, and there just isn't enough time in the season to, even if you are better, jump up from 32nd. Like, that's a legit possibility. And again, that's why I would wait for now. But whereas, let's say 2 weeks ago, you asked me this question, I would have said, there's no way I want to make a coaching change before the
Yes.
end of the season because I don't want to potentially ruin this tank. I think this tank is rolling so strongly, and
Yeah.
Winnipeg is starting to win games that you may be in a position where at some point, let's say March, you look at the standings and say, hey, even if we bring Manny in, we're still going to finish 32nd.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just wonder if that can happen in February.
Perhaps.
Again,
I'd rather play it a little bit safer.
But Olympic break, right? Like, you're not even playing games in February. Do you know what I mean? Like, you might be able to make that switch early February, have a few games, and then you're not playing games till the end of February, and then all of a sudden it's March. I know months.
We'll see. I tend to be a little bit more conservative with the timelines just because I really like for them to finish 32nd. It's not about, oh, you're going to get the first overall pick. It's more, all right, you've guaranteed at worst the third overall pick.
Yes.
And you just never know what can happen sometimes in terms of other team sell-offs. And like, do you remember how badly Boston plummeted down the standings last year?
Yes, that's true.
It was like, it was like unbelievable, right? And all it takes is one team to go on that kind of slide. So I'd be a little bit more like I'd really want to be confident that hey, there's not enough of a runway to compromise 32nd place before making any kind of coaching change. But whereas before it wasn't even a thought, it's at least something you maybe think about because truth be told, yeah, you're gonna have some stretches where in a losing year, things are going to look ugly, right? You're not going to lose every game 2-1, 3-2 if you're going to be 32nd, but there are enough bigger picture question marks and red flags in terms of how I think Foote has managed young players and just, for instance, the way that he opened things. First of all, remember back in training camp when we were talking about them shifting to some kind of man-on-man or just being more aggressive in the D zone. And you and I expressed our concern that I don't know if they have the personnel to execute that properly. And just in general, the idea that, okay, you're going to open things up, but and be less low event compared to Rick Tocchet hockey. But do you have the offensive weapons to play a little bit more run and gun, quicker pace? And this is where it's not just that, all right, they're a defensive disaster, but in 5 of their last 6 games, I believe they've been limited to 1 or fewer goals. So you're not accomplishing or making progress in any area where, all right, if you're a defensive disaster, at least maybe some of your players are, chipping in some offense and you're losing games, I don't know, 6-3 or 6-4. But that's part of the issue is it's hard to find reasons for hope, silver linings, which even when you're at the bottom of the NHL standings, there should be some of that.
Mm-hmm. We got a super chat here. Owen Jay-Z. He said McKenna had a 3-point weekend. Do you think he's turned a corner this season? I said it last week. I think I keep going back and forth. A bit, but right now at least, I think you might be overthinking it if you convince yourself that Gavin McKenna shouldn't be the first overall pick. I think you're just overthinking it. And I think, again, I just try to think of the alternate reality of like, what if he was still in the dub where he put up like 190 million points last season, right? Like he did it as a 16-year-old. What would he be doing in the dub right now? And again, I just wonder about that like alternate reality. Fact of the matter is he put up a ton of points at the World Juniors. Yes, you would have liked to see him do more in the medal round and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know. The more I find out about Gavin McKenna, also Tyson Cole writing a piece right now about Gavin McKenna. Tyson's going to have a lot, but part of his research is just like who McKenna's playing with. It's not the best guys on Penn State right now. So Tyson's going to have a big write-up on that over at CanucksArmy.com, but I think some context is needed. Tyson's going to, it's going to go on Daily Faceoff. It's going to be Tyson's Daily Faceoff debut, his national debut for Tyson Cole over at Canucks Army, but he's going to be writing it for Daily Faceoff. It's going to be about McKenna, contextualizing his season a bit. I'm having trouble with the idea that McKenna's not the first overall pick.
Yeah, I think anybody who has him lower than second is, I'm not going to say out to lunch, but I would disagree pretty strongly with.
Yeah.
I do think Stenberg, I'm not going to completely write him off the number 1 overall pick conversation, though, just because in his case, you're talking about historic SHL production as well.
Yes.
Right? With McKenna, yeah, the WHL production was extremely special and hinted at, all right, could this guy be a superstar in the NHL right out of the gate? But with Stenberg as well, it's not as if we're talking about, decent SHL production. We're talking about he's in the same territory as the Sedins and Peter Forsberg and all these kinds of guys. So he's a special prospect in his own right as well. Now, to be very clear, neither one of McKenna or Stenberg, they're not in the Celebrini, Bedard, Schaefer tier where they're going to come in and be franchise-altering players out of the gate. I think that's one thing that is becoming apparent is you're not going to draft one of these guys and then immediately in year 1 they're going to be point per game guys or leading your franchise to a quick turnaround. But even though I largely agree with your point that maybe we're overthinking things with McKenna, Stenberg's rise is legit as well. It isn't just a case of we're having these conversations because of could McKenna not go number 1 because McKenna is being picked apart. Part of it is also Stenberg's playing better than anybody could have anticipated before the season started.
I wanted to get this update from Alvin on Demko. All right. Did you see this?
Yeah, I did.
All right. I think we are going through it, taking opinions from other resources around the world to see where his status is and what needs to be done or not. That doesn't sound good.
I don't think any of us are surprised, though, because the original popliteus injury that he suffered in 2024, Demko himself told us at training camp later that fall that there is no documented example of, forget an NHL player, any hockey player suffering the popliteus injury. He ultimately ended up picking up. So even at that time, Demko was talking about how difficult it was to come up with a treatment plan and how many different opinions they were seeking and just the research of trying to figure out, all right, there are some case studies of this happening in soccer players before. How did they deal with it? So even the original popliteus injury, which I have no idea whether this one relates to that or not, but I wouldn't be surprised just because of how much compensation can occur and cause further issues in and around that same lower body region. But the point being, them not exactly knowing what's the optimal treatment plan right away. They were in that same position before. So it's not like I'm not shocked when they say, oh, they're seeking opinions globally, because this is likely a complex injury situation. One that, like, his body and unique set of injury history is something that no NHL player has, again, ever dealt with. So doesn't surprise me. And ultimately, it does make you bearish about his ability to actually play and stick in the NHL again. But it's just the reality of the situation.
That extension, $8.25 million for 3 years after this one. Tough one. And then Forbert. It just looks like Forbert's out for the year. That was the update from Alvin. Not word for word, but we've known for a while that it was probably, like, I think Adam Foote mentioned he could be out for the whole year. It's starting to look that way for Forbert. We'll dedicate a whole show probably to Derek Forbert in the end. Like, I'm assuming he'll speak at some point, but yeah, that is really, really tough news for Derek Forbert. Last thing from me before we talk about baseball. Filip Hronek, did you see this over the weekend? Filip Hronek, nearing a return, continuing to work back, spoke publicly for the first time since the hit from Tom Wilson. Didn't have too much to say about, like, oh, what a bad hit or anything like that. He said, like, this is hockey. I need to protect myself, that type of stuff. And he's like, I can't think about it too much, but I also can't forget about it because it was a moment to protect myself, all that sort of stuff. But what really caught my attention was this stuff he said about the Czech national team coach. So the quote was, and it started with a shot at the Vancouver media, nothing different there, nothing unusual about that. So I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. It started with a question, I believe it was from JPAT, about, do you have the full support of your family? Obviously, Heedle's had a lot of injuries in his past. still a relatively young guy at 26 years old, and was just kind of asked, like, there's a lot of people in our chat every day that Chytil gets mentioned, is why is he coming back? Why is he playing? How can his family support this? All that sort of stuff. So he was asked about, do you have the support of your family? And he said, sure, yeah, everybody's with me, of course. You guys have your own job to make articles and say things about the injury, create your own stuff in the media. Then he said, sometimes even for my family, when they know from me firsthand what's going on, sometimes they read here, talking about Vancouver, or even in Czech, some stuff that's not helping them as well. And then he goes on a tangent here, and this part's important. Listen up. Of course, there's been some stuff from the press conference of the Czech national team as well. So it wasn't nice to hear that when people who don't know the situation about where I am speaks about it and makes statements. And then I'm assuming he meant on subjects they know nothing about. So it's been hard, but yeah, I got my whole family behind me and I'm focusing on myself right now. Expanded on that frustration about the roster with the Olympics. He said, I wanted to go to the Olympics and I would be very proud to represent my country. But you know, sometimes the situation is like this. Like I said, there was something said in a press conference by our head coach of the Czech national team who said some stuff and made some statements which were not true and which were a little bit made up. I never got the call from him, and he said some stuff which hurt my family and hurt me as well a lot because it's not true at all. It puts me in a bad situation mentally, even my whole family. I'm just not happy about that. But, you know, I'm focusing a lot on my recovery here now in the Canucks because the Olympics is not possible now. I'm just focusing now on coming back here and playing as best I can. So naturally, I tried to dig up from a bunch of Czech websites. I was on the Czech web a lot on Sunday, trying to figure out what exactly was said. The most I could find from head coach Radim Hrulik, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and this is translated through Google Translate, of course, because it was spoken in Czech. It was the predictions were that he would play 2 weeks ago. This was said on January 6th, by the way, that he would play 2 weeks ago, but he hasn't played yet. For us, it's an option only if someone falls out of the selection. Now, that's all I could find. Clearly, there's something more going on, and I think this is going to be one that we ask Chytil about. Again, I don't think he spoke today at practice. Again, he spoke yesterday, but this is probably going to be one that the story doesn't seem over on. Like, I think Chytil's going to want to clarify what he was talking about at some point and what was said. That's all I could find, but certainly some interesting how fired up he was about these comments from the Czech national team coach.
Yeah, and even looking at Czechia's original roster, they have 7 non-NHL forwards on it, and because you can name injury replacements pretty close up until the actual start of the tournament, I'm surprised they didn't just name him to the team, and then, all right, if he doesn't play in NHL games right before the Olympic break, we can just name an injury replacement and take him off the team. You even among the NHL guys, you've got David Kampf going. Yeah. And considering how little high-end forward talent they have compared to the other teams, or outside of Pastrnak, Necas, Hurdle, and Zacha, their forward group just pales in comparison to the other top countries. Why would you not want to take a gamble on Chytil, who, when healthy, has been so dynamic, has been a legitimate play driver offensively? So yeah, that's an odd one. And obviously there's a lot that we don't know behind the scenes about maybe how that decision was made, and clearly on Chytil's end, he feels there's been a lack of communication.
Yeah, some disrespect. He was not happy about it. So just wanted to make sure we mentioned that as well. The full press conference of that one as well is up on Canucks Army YouTube. You can go find it. CA YouTube channel. Okay, Harm, anything else? I quickly want to talk about baseball.
Yeah, let's talk about baseball.
All right, so for everybody listening to this, you maybe heard on Friday that we were going to play baseball. Me, Jacob, and Harmon, and one of my other friends who's good at baseball. Went to play. It was Harmon's first time. Harmon's going to be playing men's league this year. Harmon and I went to, shout out Pro Stock, no free ads, but shout out Pro Stock, been there for me all these years. Harmon and I went to Pro Stock, bought you a glove. Let me also just say, baseball ain't what it used to be when I was a kid. Like, I haven't bought baseball equipment since like 2015. The most mundane glove we could find was baby blue. That's what you ended up buying. I like your glove. It looks good. But there's like 14 colors on all these gloves now. Oh my gosh. My kid playing baseball, you will not see him with more than 2 colors. You get to pick 2 colors. Okay. You get to pick 2 colors max. I prefer you pick one, brown, but if you're going to pick more than one, you can have 2. maximum. These like 13 color gloves. What are we doing here? I look, if I'm coaching, right, and I'm watching little Brixton and little, Claxton or whatever these people are naming their kids these days. If I'm watching those kids go 0 for 4 at the plate and they've got 13 different colors on and 3 chains hanging out, there's going to be pull to pull for a while. And I know Jacob coached. I think Jacob agrees with me on this. I'm going to have a big problem with this down the line. I'm just getting it out there now.
I fully agree. Like, I normally would make fun of you for, Uncle Old Man Quad's take, but some of those gloves were just hideous.
Crazy. And then the guy even said, he's like, oh, the kids love them. I was like, well, that's a problem. Anyways, we went to play baseball. I got a little sidetracked there. We went to play baseball. You had a new glove. You did great. It was so funny. We were like, are you sure this is your first time playing? Like, you're fielding grounders, like nothing got by you, made 0 errors. You were hitting the ball just fine. Everything was like, you were fine. You were like really good. And I even said, like, you're better than me at fielding grounders, which is hilarious. And then we talked about it and you made a good point. You were like, this is just cricket, but now I have a glove instead of bare hands.
Yeah, the fielding part, right? Because, cricket balls are actually slightly harder than baseballs. So when we're doing these ground ball drills, I've done the exact same drills, except I have no glove. And it's a slightly different technique, obviously. But then you give me a glove, it's like, okay, this is theoretically easier. And same thing with the fly balls. Like, in cricket, like, we would take those same ones where it's like someone just skies it in the air and we have to catch it with our bare hands. So it's now you give me the glove. Now all I got to do is just make sure that I'm tracking it properly. Whereas before there's a leather ball and I got to catch it with my bare hands without, catching my fingers in the wrong spot.
Dude, you're giving me coaching ideas. Like, when I'm coaching my 9U team one day, put the gloves away, boys. We're playing barehanded today. All the parents, no, not little Claxton. No, you bare hand. This is how we're gonna learn to field. I'm jealous that I never learned how to field barehanded because you were natural. It was great. You did, yeah.
Well, it's like when you're 13, which is around the time when you first get to play with the like real leather cricket ball.
Okay.
Then the first year or two, it's just you're learning the field without being scared of the ball, because it can genuinely hurt you. But then once you get over it, then again, that's why in baseball, when it's like a hard line drive or something, like, I'm not scared of it. If that makes sense.
No, we actually, like, we were joking around. We were like, some of the plays you were making, we didn't think you realized how hard some of them were. Like, I think you could just you were just making them. You're like, oh, of course I'm going to make this play. And we're like, huh, that's pretty good. So anyways, that was the funny thing. You're going to be just fine at baseball.
We'll see the hitting part. Like, the fielding, like, I expected to be very good. The hitting, I'm curious, like, how quickly, like, how much
didn't pop up once. Your hand-eye is perfect. You're hitting everything. You've like one of the most level swings I've ever seen on a baseball diamond. You're going to be fine. I wish we got video of it, especially since you didn't have all the gear. So you had a baby blue glove. I let you borrow a bright yellow hat, and then you didn't have cleats, so you wore your bright green soccer cleats, your neon green soccer cleats. You were quite the colorful ball player, I'll say that. Yeah, we'll get you some black cleats. You'll look good out there.
Hopefully, I can dig up my black soccer cleats from somewhere, because those are a little more subtle.
Yeah, a little less flashy. All right. Anything else from anyone?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. Jacob, do you want to chime in on Harm's ball playing?
I was impressed. I was very impressed. And like, he's so athletic that he's probably going to steal a bunch of bases. And, I made the joke, and he's a left-handed hitter. So I made the joke. It's like Harman's going to be like Ichiro out there coming in. I know Ichiro played in Japan, but came to North America and was a rookie later on, like later in his 20s. And it's like, oh, yeah, he's just like the best player in the world. Okay.
We're going to teach Harm how to drag bunt.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right. Let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, which is brought to you by Bet365. Ooh. All right. No, we're going back to the hardwood. Let's go to the hardwood, Jacob. I don't remember what I took last time. If you
I don't remember.
Okay.
It's tough over the weekend. Sometimes I accidentally delete it.
I am
let us know
dumb
if they remember.
I am Dom B in the chat said Quads wants Harm to join his baseball team so Harmon can bail him out in baseball as well.
No, you're actually good at baseball. Like, you don't need me to bail you out. So
Well, thanks, Harm. Appreciate that.
Speaking of bailing out, Quads, we might be healthy scratching you for feud this week.
What do you mean might be? We talked about this. This is a plan that we formed last week on Feud. Everybody heard this. J-Pat's fill it in. All right.
Yes, and I did talk to Jeff, so he's interested.
New
Feud survey is available.
Okay.
Yeah, it's available. It's in the description. It's also pinned in the YouTube live chat. So if you look, you can find it nice and easily right there. Please fill out the survey.
Sweet. All right. Today, our Bet365 bet of the day. Oh, yeah. Okay. The Boston Celtics are in Detroit tonight to take on the Pistons. And I like the 120 money line. I like the plus 120 money line for the Celtics. I think the Celtics are going to get it done tonight. I'm taking them. I don't even need to try to name a player on the Celtics.
No Kevin Garnett or Paul
No,
Pierce
that's too
or...
old. But Kyrie Irving, he's on the Mavericks now. I know that. Hey, I know that. I'm just announcing it.
I actually don't know where Kyrie is now. He's
about-
not on the Mavs, but
Yeah, he's on the Mavs.
is he?
Yeah.
He,
Oh,
man.
you are right.
Yep.
Wow, Harm doesn't
Wow.
know ball. Write it down, Jacob. Harm
Yeah,
doesn't
he
know
was-
ball.
So the Mavericks, they did their training camp in Vancouver this year because they played a preseason game. So they did a few days of practice up at SFU, and there was photos of Kyrie Irving balling out in SFU's gym, which obviously for those of you who know, I used to work there. So that was kind of cool to see. But yeah.
Jaylen Brown, there's a guy. And the Boston Celtics, they're going to take down the Pistons tonight. Andre Drummond's not going to know what hit him. Plus 120 odds. You can get that over at Bet365. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get on the game. Use the code NATION at Bet365. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. Bit of a long show today. Canucks play tonight. We didn't even mention that. They play the Islanders tonight. We'll break it down on tomorrow's show. For my co-host, Harman Dial, and our technical producer, Jacob Bazar, my name is Dave Woodrelli. Thanks so much for the episode of Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.